Kathy and Steve Piet. Where's Kathy? There she is, back there in the back row. She has her shirt on. Mick Nelson and Lisa Demers? Demers. Okay. I know it's visit Poland from 25 September to 8 October. Most of the time they were with the Trafalgar tour, Best of Poland. Today, Steve and Mick will share some of their experience and what it means. Steve's experience in Poland builds on 3 visits to the USSR and Russia and a lifelong passion for history. Mick is a lifelong learner with expressed interest in history. He found this trip one of the most impactful of his life. They will try to answer questions during the talk and at the end of the 4 parts. Before World War II, Nazi occupation, Nazi occupation, Soviet occupation, and post-war. I've been here too long, Steve, sorry. So I'm just going to turn it over to you guys for a wonderful presentation. Are we okay on the lights?
Can you guys see the slides?
Yeah.
If that changes, let us know. If my voice fades, let me know, and we've got a microphone here we can use. This was a magnificent adventure. I have wanted to go to Poland for most of my life. But what really kicked it into higher gear was when I read James Michener's novel, Poland. I don't know if who's read something by Michener?
How long did it take you to read it?
I don't remember. Yeah, it's thick. It essentially covers 1,000 years of Polish history in a historical fiction sense. The handout I've given you, we won't follow that exactly, but the talk is organized chronologically. As Margaret said, ask questions as we go. We've divided this into 4 pieces to rest our voices. After the second one, we'll probably take a potty break, but we'll also have, invite questions at the end of each course.
Steve, you need to use the microphone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, this better?
Much better.
Okay. 1241. The Mongols sweep into Poland from the east. Every hour in Krakow, and whenever possible, I'll use the Polish pronunciation, or at least what my voice allows me to do with Polish pronunciation. The W at the end of Krakow is pronounced as a V. You see up here, there, that window, we'll zoom in on that. The legend is, during the sacking of Warsaw, Krakow, a guy was sounding an alarm with a trumpet or bugle, and was shot mid-note in the throat. When you look at this, even the building has arrows on the side. It stops, and then it waits. It does that every hour. Poland has not forgotten its history. This is 3 times further in the past than the age of the United States. We flew into Warsaw, or Warsaw, which I can't pronounce correctly. Came up here to Gdansk, down here, down in the mountains, and then back. Traveled about 1,000 miles. Everything the Poles could do to preserve their history, they do. One day, Krakow, we were in Old Town Square, and I went looking for a bathroom. And on the way to the bathroom, inside the building, was ruins by the city back when it was damaged by the Soviets, which I'll come back to later. It's just sitting there, but they built around it instead of tearing it down. Want to pick off on the salt mine?
Yes, this is a salt mine that exists in Poland. It's been there for a long time. We went down to about a 600-foot depth elevation, 1,600 steps down. The good news is they put us in the old elevator that they used to take us back up to the top. That elevator was very interesting because it had all the types of ropes and pulleys and stuff. They're still using them. They used to connect it to donkeys that walk around in a circle to move the salt up out of this mine and take it up high. They had all the airlocks that you needed to keep the air fresh and going through. You'd have to go in, everybody get in, we'd close the one door and open the other door to go out. So they had all those kind of controls on it to keep us doing that. That is one of the most interesting things, and I had seen this on some TV show late night sometime. Thought I wanted to go there, and I was very pleased to find out we were going to make it there. So, and they had built all these things. The steps do not have a big drop. They're made for older people. You guys enjoy it. That's you. That helps a little. So here we go here. Now the interesting thing of what you're looking at here, all the chandeliers, the miners would say after the shift was open and make those things out of salt crystals. So all these chandeliers that you see in there are made out of salt. And there's various other artifacts in there. We have a number of pictures. The issue with it is you couldn't use the flash, so some of our pictures didn't turn out as well as we'd like. And we'll give you a little bit of the flavor of it. There's one of the chandeliers lit up. I think that's one of our slides too, that we got lucky with. But every one of those things are salt crystals that they build on their own. Let's see. Here we go. Here's another into the Last Supper. Poland is very religious. About 85% of Poland is Catholic. So they're very religious, and so that's been there for a long time. Here's another one. St. John Paul the Great. The detail on these things is phenomenal. It's actually very, very interesting. And then we'll go to St. Mary's in Gdansk. Yeah.
I did not realize until this trip the extent of some of Polish architecture and how old. Church is the largest brick church in the world. And it's the largest brick structure of any type in the world. Why brick? Because the area around Gdansk is a bunch of mud. And what does mud do? It makes bricks. So everything in Gdansk that's old is made from bricks. The inside of the church is gorgeous. The clock dates to around 1500. Still operates. We visited a castle that's only slightly less old.
And this is Malbork Castle. This is a very interesting castle that we went to. Largest brick structure in the world. Huge. It had all the entryways and everything, and been a lot of restoration's been done. They've taken the poles and taken it back, and they're trying to preserve that background. And if you look across here, whoops, somebody can't run. If you look across here, this is all castle. Wow. The interesting thing is it had moats around it, and one of the things that I found kind of interesting from the standpoint of living in the past, at the corners of the castle they had these big turrets. Well, there were also latrines in there that they'd use those and they'd go right down into the river and get washed out, so they always had clean water because they'd just wash it away. Which is, we don't think about the disposal of waste and stuff that much in our modern society. When you look at how they quickly got rid of the same things that would cause diseases, I found it very interesting. Well, let's see if I can get this right. This is in the interior of the castle. Now what's really interesting here, we weren't allowed to use anything. This just so happens to be two different pictures that I took that are married together. I wanted to put both up to decide which you use, and I was able to marry them together to where it looks like I'm looking slightly to the left on the one and slightly to the right on the other. There was more light over in that area, so I was trying to get something that would come through that I could preserve in my photograph. Did I go backwards? I did. Yep. Easy to do. Copernicus, I'll let Steve talk to Copernicus.
Polish history is totally entwined with both German and Russian history. And if you think about the map of Europe, it's just open borders all the way across. So, as we'll talk more, boundaries have changed again and again. Well, Copernicus got to be one of the more famous Polish scientists. His parents spoke German, but he was educated in the Polish schools. This is a statue of him in Toruń. The Church of Peace, and I always screw up the name of that city when I try to pronounce it. It's Botswana? No, there's no A at the end of it.
This was a fun thing to go into. This Church of Peace is a Presbyterian church. 85% of Poland is Catholic. So they asked for permission to build the church. They finally got permission, but with a couple of caveats. They could only use wood and straw, mud, and it had to be completed in 11 months. So they didn't want it to be built. Well, somehow they pulled it off, and I'm sure that some of what we're seeing here were revisions that happened after that was taken care of. But it was really interesting to see that somebody had that kind of dedication, not somebody, a group of people had that kind of dedication to build that church with those restrictions in that time period. Found it very fascinating. And this is another one that you got some lighting in there, but from a photography standpoint, you're going to get what you get because you can't use your flash in most of these places. So we apologize for a little bit of that. Here's another one. This would be Wrocław. The W's are pronounced as B's. The other interesting thing is they have 32 characters in their alphabet, and they have 7 accent marks. You will not learn Polish on a 14-day trip. You will not read any of the signs and understand them. You don't have a chance at all of doing that. And this is a Villanova. Steve's going to pronounce that.
Villanova Palace, built by King John III Sobieski. Anyone recognize that name? I see a couple of hands. He saved Europe. Vienna, exactly. The Turks came up and sieged Vienna. They needed help. They called on their neighbors to the north, the Poles. He raised an army, marched south, and changed the course of history. Saved Vienna and saved most of Europe from invasion. He built this palace. Warsaw, spelled in Polish, by the way, is here.
Warszawa.
Thank you, Sandy. Say it loud so everyone can hear that.
Warszawa.
Easy for her to say. Polish boundaries, as I said, have changed again and again. The most infamous is the partition of Poland, which took 3 steps: 1772, 1793, 1795. Austria, Prussia, and Russia ate Poland. Poland disappeared from the map for 123 years. Curiously enough, probably the most famous Polish composer, Chopin, spent his whole life. We think of him as Polish, and he was, but Poland did not exist. When I did the tour, we had a wonderful concert. It was a Japanese lady performed, and the power and grace of that performance was stunning. Just stunning. She played Chopin for an hour and a half or so. Marie Curie, I'll skip over the middle name there. She lived to see Poland resurrected, but most of her life, again, we think of her correctly as a Polish scientist, Poland did not exist. It was not on the map of Europe. This is right outside the old town. It's a commercial slide because our bus went by too fast to take a picture. First woman to win the Nobel Prize and the only person to ever win 2 areas, chemistry and physics. I came across this curious map. We won't spend much time on it, but I want to give you a sense of what it's telling us. It shows region by region how long an area has been part of Poland. Everything from 6 years up to 926 years. So down in here, around Warsaw, in Polish pretty much the whole time. Parts of Ukraine were at one time in Poland. Down here, up here Lithuania is there. Nowadays Belarus is here. So this just illustrates how much, from a boundary perspective, Poland has changed. Right, that's the end of part one. Any questions or comments now? Before we go?
On that last map, Steve, can you put that back up there and show us, like, where is like Warsaw on that map, or something that we can connect to on
Warsaw
modern
is
day?
right in here.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I got it.
One of the things that we missed mentioning about Copernicus, he's the gentleman that changed, the mathematician that changed the focus of our universe to being around the sun rather than around the earth. Everybody thought everything revolved around the earth until Copernicus got involved in it. And I think that was 1600s when he did that.
We started with
Okay, this is Western Platte area near Gdansk. First shots of World War II were fired here. We were here looking at this, and this has bullet holes that you wouldn't believe. They were still there resolving. And they were told that they needed to hold that thing for 36 hours when this started. The first shots were fired there. They held it for 7 days. They stuck with it for 7 days. Now, the biggest reason this didn't get totally blown away is it was being fired by a big military ship out there, and they couldn't get their guns low enough, so they were shooting over the top of this for the most part. So that's the biggest reason that they got through that, all the way through that. So it was really interesting, very sobering when you, a lot of this when you go through, it's very sobering. We've been back for 4 or 5 months now, and I don't think there's a day that goes by. I don't think it's something we saw there. Something triggers my memory or whatever. Because we met some of the people who lived with us on this. This is another picture of that same building.
Was that a home or a?
No, this was actually a small barracks. So they were stationed there, and I don't remember the size of the people, but that's a small barracks that they had that was under fire. And then they kind of fought around this spit of land that sticks out. It's probably 30 minutes from Gdansk, the main part of Gdansk, more or less 30 minutes. But this is where everything got started. This is Google will take things. We were in one of the cemeteries, and if you take a picture of the Polish, it will translate it to the English. So if you go anywhere out in the country, go get that translation app. It's well worth it. So we found that kind of by accident. At least I thought it was by accident.
The inscription here, this is at Western Platte, was by Pope John Paul. And in his speech to a young audience, he said, "Young friends," in English, "each of you young friends also find some of your own Western Platte in life," which means being challenged the way the Polish troops were by the Nazis that held out 7 days. Some dimensions of tasks that must be undertaken and fulfilled. Some order of laws and values that need to be maintained and defended for ourselves and others. It must have been an inspirational speech. Let's see if we can advance that. So the Nazis took Poland. Soviets ended up taking part of it. We'll come to that later. 1943, the Jews in a ghetto in Warsaw revolted. The ghetto uprising, this is from a quote at the U.S. Memorial Museum on the Holocaust, one of the most significant occurrences in the history of the Jewish people. Why did they revolt? The last surviving rebellion commander said their inspiration to fight was not to allow Germans alone to pick the time and place of our deaths.
How long was the concentration camp there before they did the uprising?
This was a ghetto.
I mean, okay, so how,
Basically, since once the Nazis took over, they started.
they're putting it in there.
Yep. So a couple of years. So this was before the actual tour. We went to the Jewish ghetto cemetery in Warsaw. And it's a dark picture. We decided not to lighten it up because of the mood. There's Mick, Kathy, and Lisa. These are mass graves. 10,000 bodies are in those graves. Civilians. This is a memorial. There's rocks from different walls and structures. You want to add to that, Vic?
Yeah.
Take it to
The things that you see right here, they started with the hole that was 30 meters deep. They laid down a layer of bodies. Sometimes they had newsprint that they put over that layer, and then they put another layer. So from 30 meters, which is more than 30 yards deep, they built that up to the ground, and they covered it with these rocks. You cannot, this is the place that we got to a day early. We got in early deliberately in case we had trouble with flights. Steve had found this. We spent probably 2 or 3 hours in there. Very somber place. You start to get a feel for the history, the concerns, and the way people would have been dealing with things, and how they had to fight with their emotions and try and come up with ways to combat the Nazis and also the Red Army. This is an interesting one because this is a monument of the children that fought in the Warsaw Ghetto. 6, 7-year-old kids gathering ammo and taking it to the fighters. We don't think of that kind of conflict. We've not been raised with ever having to think of that kind of thing. But this particular monument is just there to honor the children that were involved. And it's just really scary to think that 6 and 7 and 8-year-old kids had to be involved for those people to even try to survive. And the risks that they were taking, and the number of them that would have been lost in the war. 85% of the
Yeah, 85% of Warsaw was destroyed by the Nazis. So this is the old town. Every building you see in this picture was reconstructed after the war. If you turn 90 degrees from the spot I took this picture, you look across the river and there's a modern soccer stadium. That's where the Soviet army sat and watched the Nazis destroy Warsaw. They were that close, less than a mile away, and they did nothing.
Why?
Because they wanted compliant Poles. When they came in, and it was very hard fighting to retake Poland from the Nazis, they didn't want independent thinkers. The Polish government in exile was in London. They were not allowed to return. One member tried, he was caught and killed. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. Soviets were the enemy of the Nazis, but they were not friends of the Poles. Krakow, we went to this monument, the empty chairs, and this is in the Krakow, or what was the Krakow Jewish ghetto enclosure. There's chairs all through here. Each of them represents people taken from the ghetto to one of the concentration and death camps. And they're pointed in different directions, most pointing toward Auschwitz, some pointing in other directions, symbolizing people taken in different directions.
Go back to that for a second. Go back to that slide for a second. Oh, there was down here, just above my head, there's a small building. That was the SS offices for one of the entrances into that portion of the ghetto. 1941 to 1943, it was there for 2 years. Over 800,000 people were processed through there and sent on their way. Some went to work camps, some went to concentration camps. They went off in various directions. One of the sobering things that happens there, each of those chairs faces a different direction. They have actually documented that so-and-so was here and they went to this particular place. This child was here and went over here, whatever. You cannot go here without being really affected. The weather was bad, it was raining, and it didn't do anything to dampen our mood because it was always kind of on the downside.
One of those chairs is here. Years ago, I lost a daughter, 2 years, 8 months old, in an accident. And I saw this picture, and I lost it. This is a picture of a little girl that the Nazis took and killed, about the age of my little girl. And I will tell you, I lost it. She's holding a little doll there. Nazis brought people from all over Europe to Auschwitz, which is just outside the city of Krakow. So the tour naturally took us to Auschwitz. You see the barbed wire? It is amazingly preserved. I had no idea. For a year I lived outside Munich, and Dachau was 20 kilometers away. I've been to Dachau several times. Most of those buildings have fallen. All the barracks are gone. One was reconstructed. Auschwitz is not like that. All the buildings are still there. So this is the double fence, the barbed wire. This picture takes a little bit of examination at the detail. You see this Nazi officer? It's real hard to see. The picture on the wall in Auschwitz is easier. He's got his hand out with his thumb. As people were brought in from the train, he'd do this, or this, this, or this. If you pointed in one direction, you went to the work camp. If you pointed in the other direction, you went straight to the gas chambers. And the four of us traveling together, we realized at our age, we'd have gone straight to the gas chambers. I dare say most of the people in this room have been sent there because they wanted young people for working or young women to rape. So this was what they called the selection. Poor folks coming in didn't know what was happening.
This is a picture I took in one of the barracks, and the interesting thing here, look at the scalloping on the stairs, all those stairs. How many footprints had to go over that to wear that down that way? Now, it's getting some of that wear from the people that are going through it today. If you think of the old buildings you've gone into that have those granite stairs, and look at them, they're still in pretty good shape for the most part. They've had lots of people. How many people had to traverse through this? These buildings were actually quite nice because they were part of it. An army barracks, the whole thing was. So as you go there, as you come in and start looking, you're surprised at how orderly, how clean it looks, and what a nice place it looks. What the Nazis turned it into was not something that was very good. Okay, this is one that shows some of the shoes that they gathered up. They recycled the stuff from people. They took their watches, they took the gold out of their teeth, they did whatever. But this is some of the shoes that they gathered up. And what they did in one of these, a couple of these barracks, they put some of what they, memorabilia, this kind, in behind glass to give you an example of what it was like. There was all sorts of things. You got the suitcases that they came in with. They recycled what they could do with that. You've got artificial limbs that were recycled. This is one we had to get from your museum slide. This one had the most impact to me personally. This is human hair. They shaved the heads of the people and used the hair. They used it for various things. They turned it into yarn to repair uniforms. They did whatever, but they saved the human hair. This bothered me probably more than any of the other slides. I was expecting to see something, but I did not expect to see that. And I told Steve, we need to get that in. I got a photo of it. I'll go get it. Well, they wouldn't let us take a photo of this particular one. So we went out and got a copy, or Steve went out and got a copy of it. And I'll let you take this one.
So I have to give you numbers. Nazis took 1.3 million people to Auschwitz. 1.1 million of those were Jews. It happens 1.1 million of that 1.3 died. Over 90% in the gas chamber in there. in that room. The tour took us through it real fast, probably to keep people from breaking down. The scale of what the Nazis did is beyond my comprehension. Want to talk about the gas? Next door to the gas chamber is the ovens. Again, they pushed us through real fast in the tour. It's quite a tour. It was group after group after group going to Auschwitz. If you visit Dachau, there's a huge plaque. It says in multiple languages the words "never again." It is not a slogan. Never again is a commitment. I pledged when I first went to Dachau and re-pledged at Auschwitz, I will do everything in my limited, tiny power to prevent this atrocity from reoccurring. I burn with hatred for the Nazis. Questions, comments before we go to part 3?
I've been to Dachau several times with students, and one time when we were there were children there, junior high kids. And I said to our tour guide, why? What are these kids doing here? This is horrible. So she went over and talked to the teacher, and she said that in Germany, every student of this age has to visit a concentration camp. We put it on our history books, we teach our children, it will never happen again.
You said that all but 200,000 of the those sent to Auschwitz were Jews. Who were the 200,000 more?
What we call gypsies, political prisoners, folks that tried to stand up to the Nazis, someone who looked crosswise at a German officer, homosexuals, and they were drawn in from all of occupied Europe.
Homosexual, disabled
Disabled.
people.
Undesirables.
I have one question.
Sure.
You probably said this, but of the people that they took to Dachau, were they mostly Jewish, or
Yes.
were they other?
Of 1.3 million people taken to Auschwitz, 1.1 were Jews. And this was what Hitler wanted. Well, while the Nazis were doing what they did to Poland, the Soviets were part of the game. Well, September 1st, 1939, the Nazis started World War II in Gdansk, as we said a few moments ago. Basically, a week later, the Soviets started attacking from the other direction, because there had been a German-Soviet treaty to split up Poland. Soviet occupation didn't last that long because the Nazis kicked them out, and then the Soviets came back in later. But before the Nazis kicked them out the first time, in April and May of 1940, the Soviets murdered 22,000 Polish military and police officers in one particular forest. I'll come back to that.
After the war, the Russians were trying to blame the Canton Forest Massacre on the Germans. It came out a little later that, it was the Russians that did it.
Yeah, that's a good setup for something that I'll come later. One of the things we all realized during this trip, as Americans, we have a certain perspective on World War II. Germans, Italians, Japanese. We think of it, we concentrate on Western Europe battles and American generals, British generals. That's not how the Poles think of it. They think of it as one army coming in from one side, smashing the hell out of the place, followed by another army coming in from the other side and smashing the place. So in the bigger picture, you've got Eastern Europe versus Germany. Eastern Europe, occupation by the Nazis and then the Soviets. So their perspective on what we call World War II is quite different from ours. Outside Botswana, again, I mangled the name. At night, we visited this monument to the victims of that forest massacre. And it was appropriate that it was a dark, cold, drizzly evening. It fit perfectly. I don't know how the tour director arranged it. Up here is the angel death. I'll show you another picture of that in a second. The matron of the homeland here is cradling the head and body of a murdered POW. You can find on the internet pictures of the daytime that lets you see this memorial better, bright sunshine. But that's not how I wanted to share it with you. Other than this little thing. So this is the matron cradling the body of a murder victim, and this is a picture that I took. It's a special place. Of course, that's what monuments are supposed to do. 1941, the Nazis turned on the Soviets, started kicking them out of Poland, and they, of course, took a good fraction of the Soviet Union. Soviets eventually counterattacked. By 44, they were back in Polish territory. Eventually sweep through Poland. They kept the Polish government in exile. That was in London. They kept them out by force. And as they came through during and after the war, they changed all kinds of boundaries in Eastern Europe. Already told you that the Soviets watched the Nazis destroy Warsaw. The Soviets themselves destroyed 85% of Gdansk. This is a before and after picture. Okay, we were at this spot. This is the same spot. Again, enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. The Poles learned that lesson real strong. Warsaw's Old Town is a cathedral. And as you walk in, I happen to see this monument. And I had to look up online because I couldn't read the Polish, and the translator app did a really awful job with the inscription, which was hard to read. This is a monument to Polish soldiers who were killed by Soviets during the period of Soviet occupation. The phrase is unpronounceable to me in Polish, but it translates as doomed or cursed soldiers. That's a close-up. Just look at that face. It's a beautiful piece of art that conveys the emotion that it's meant to. But the Poles fought back. 1970, there was an uprising at the Gdansk shipyards. They made what they later realized was a mistake. They conducted their protests outside the shipyard gates. That allowed tanks to come in and slaughter. Later on, they revised their tactics. In '76, there was the first workers' strike, also in Gdansk. There's this beautiful tall monument to the fallen workers. That led to this, if you will, historic question. Who was going to win? Communist Soviet system or some Polish guy? Well, '79, Karol Wojtyła was elected Pope John Paul II. That helped stimulate a change of history. The Poles and cadets fought back again. They organized the Solidarity Union. And because of the importance of the shipyard and the fact they had shut down its operation, they had no choice but to recognize and make an agreement with the union. When Lech Walesa signed the agreement, he used very large pen. And of course, at the gift shop, you can buy a replica of it. And what he used on that pen, as well as this, is a picture of John Paul. That was Walensa's way of involving him directly in that triumph. The building is designed to look like a ship hull. And inside, the same motif. It's a beautiful building. Walensa is still alive, and he has an office in here. We didn't get to see the office, but it's an imposing building. But the Soviets bounced back. They then caused a martial law to be proclaimed in late '81. But the Poles didn't give up. They fought back, eventually forced the Soviet-backed government to free elections. April '89. And our guide that did it in the dance that day described that as when World War II ended. We think of it as ending when the Japanese surrendered. At least some Poles view it differently. This has come up in some of the discussion and audience comments before. So our guide that day pointed out that with regard to the Nazis, the Nazi regime is gone. The people who were involved were punished. The crimes fully made public. Children are taught about crimes. Margaret, you just said that. And the ideology is not promoted in college. And then she stopped and said, none of those statements are true for the crimes done by the Soviets. The regime is essentially still there. Putin, after all, is a Soviet KGB. The people were not punished. The crimes to this day are not fully made public. The children are not taught about Soviet crimes in Russia. And of course, communism is certainly promoted in schools. So she said something that totally floored me. Because she gets asked the question, which was worse? And her answer was this. And I had no idea that a Pole would say such a thing, given what the Nazis had done. And from the standpoint all these decades later, that the Soviets did, in the lack of accountability, worse. I have to end this section with a fairly famous quote. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And if you want that driven home, visit Poland. They are amazing people, just amazing people, and have been for 1,000 years. They have survived invasions from the left, the right, the south, even the Swedes to the north, and they keep bouncing back. So let's take maybe a potty break here, Margaret. 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Who is the man that said that? I'm not familiar with that name.
George someone else can pronounce it.
Santayana?
Anyone want to answer that question? Because I can't tell you much about
He's an
him.
American philosopher.
American philosopher?
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered why the Soviets ended up with so much ground after World War II? I learned a very interesting fact. That was a trade-off that Winston and Roosevelt made with Stalin. Stalin put his soldiers up and took mass casualties because he got the land. So that's when we traded off so we could protect and not lose as many lives. Don't know that you learned that here, but we sure heard about it over there. It's very interesting to me the way the politics got involved and still get involved today. So that was something. And I want to go back a couple slides.
Good.
This building is a replica of a ship. And the reason for the replica, Gdansk became a shipbuilding center for the Soviets. And that's what they had. So when they win this independence, if you will, well, their main customer is Soviet. So where are they going to go for work? So they had a lot of struggles that came from fighting for that independence, but they took it on anyway. But that whole building is a replica of the ships, and that's what it's, as you go through, you got various displays that are like in the hold of the ship and whatever. There's various stories in there. So that was a very interesting tour. It was fascinating to me because I have a welding background. That's what I did before I went back to school and got an engineering degree. So I found all this very, very interesting. Any comments or questions from anybody?
So, today, has Poland got a pretty strong build-up of military to protect themselves?
They have some military, I can't answer that definitively. I'll tell you what my feel for that is. They have some military, but part of why they joined the European Union is they're now in that conglomerate, if you will, so where they're all taking care of each other. We did get quite a bit of discussion from the tour director on the bus as you go. He's on a microphone telling you various sites. Got a discussion about what happened with the European Union. He's a farmer, and all his tractors, he says, are old enough that he can work on them himself. But part of joining the European Union, they got like $10,000 for the farmers so they could get new equipment. Well, the problem with that, the suppliers realized they had the $10,000, so the prices went up by $10,000. So when you look at all those trade-offs, when you try to get that to happen, they don't exactly affect the way we plan when we go with it. Anything else? Any other questions?
So what's the attitude of the Poles towards the United States?
From what we saw, it's excellent. It's absolutely excellent. Do you know where the second largest population of Polish people is? Chicago, Illinois. As the war got started, a lot of them moved to Chicago. And the people, what they say, if you meet a Polish person in Poland, they likely have a relative living in Chicago. So Chicago, but we found it very good. One of the things that we all commented on, we never felt at risk. We never felt like we were going to be assaulted or anything through the whole trip. Now, we've done other trips, and there's certain places you get, you think, I need out of here as quickly as I can get out of here. And you leave. You know, you just get out of there. The other thing I'll point out to you, to celebrate the solidarity, 10 years after, they gathered up a lot of the key players who were flying to Russia for a celebration. The interesting thing is the plane crashed, and all of them were killed. And that's kind of showed up in the Soviet history a time or so. So you got to kind of consider what might have been happening there more than what the celebration was getting even, basically, is the way I interpret it. Any other questions so far? Go ahead.
When were you there?
Late September, early October. Any others?
So the map that he gave us, what's the significance of the blue lines with the white dots on them?
That was our tour path.
Oh, that was your tour route?
Yeah. We put about 1,000 miles on the tour bus. We got pretty familiar with that bus.
Should probably explain a little bit about the tour. You get a tour director that's with you for the whole trip. The whole 12 days we were with Trafalgar, he was with us. And he leads the whole thing. And as you go there, you got your basic price for the tour, and then they have various excursions. The reason for the excursions, if they put them all in at prices where a lot of people would go. So you get the basic trip, and then you can pick the other things that you want to see. The salt mine was one of the excursions. If you didn't do the excursion, then you could go off and do things on your own. They tell you, okay, you're going to be here from this time period, then we're going to meet back here at a certain time. And it worked very, very well. And then as we went around, we also had a resident expert that they bring onto the bus. They drive through the city and show you places, and the resident expert would tell you things that you should know about it. I learned that they had to work and get a certification to be a guide. They wanted this history to be told correctly, so the guides all had to go take a test and be certified. So from this particular trip, I can tell you, the only thing I'd change is maybe a little bit more time there. That there was impact with everything, but the Polish people were very friendly, very easy to get along with. They have a lot of pride in their country. They make a lot of things. They're famous for their crystal and glassware and things like that. And so they really push that kind of stuff. Any other questions on that?
Well, so how much, so the Polish people, how many of them know the English language?
Most of them that we saw seem to be speaking English reasonably well.
No.
Infinitely better than any of us speak Polish. Infinitely better.
We can't even get the first couple syllables out that time of our time.
Do they teach English in school?
Yes.
Yeah.
Their English, you go to any of the shops, you can understand them.
Yep.
You feel very comfortable, to be very honest with you. Much more so than I ever expected. Oh, the other thing I'll tell you, they put you on these big buses about the same size as the side buses. Take them through the numbered streets at 30 miles an hour with no problem at all. These guys are good. How the hell they do it, I do not know. Because they'll come up and they'll slow down and you'll think he's going to hit, and he makes the corner and he accelerates again. So you just need to sit further in the back because it doesn't get to the crash site quite as early. They move those buses. They treat them like a taxi. So they do a very good job right yesterday.
Well, with the Soviet aggression in Ukraine and what's gone on, and they're wanting more property, did you see any anxiety from the Polish people over that?
Yeah, a little bit. But one of the things that we learned from our tour director, the soil they're fighting for in the Ukraine is some of the best soil in the world. They're after that because of the quality of the soil. It's absolutely, Poland has good soil. And he says that the stuff that they're fighting for in the Ukraine is absolutely some of the best soil anywhere in the world.
Our tour director, Piet, told us that there's well over 1 million Ukrainian refugees in Poland. And then I don't know why, I asked the question, what's easier, Poles learning Ukrainian or Ukrainians learning Polish? And the Poles say that it's tougher for them to learn Ukrainian, which then utterly baffles me at how anyone can learn that. Let's take a break. Want to come back?
Let's just keep going.
Okay.
Just keep going.
Which tour company did you guys go on?
We'll talk about that. It's Trafalgar.
Later on? Okay.
I don't know if this is, I
Doesn't
just
matter,
have
just
a
ask.
question. But on the slide where you showed how the Germans were held accountable for their war atrocities, but the Russians were not. Why is that? Why
Who won? Who won the war? The Nazis lost. The U.S., United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union won. They dictated the terms. They forced Germany into what you see in that column. At Dachau, you can see video clips of General Eisenhower bringing residents of Dachau into the concentration camp. Now, Dachau concentration camp is not outside town like Auschwitz. It's smack dab in the middle of Dachau. There's no way in hell that the residents there didn't have at least some clue as to what was going on. But of course, it's a horrible idea to stand up to either of these regimes. So the Soviets won. The Nazi government was gone, and we dictated. And, the Soviets took 1/4 or so of Germany, and the Allies took the other ones, and we dictated. We forced them to do what was done at Dachau. No one's forced the Soviets to do anything. So, Poland today. So obviously the talk did not follow our path around the country. We thought it might make sense, more sense, to put it together in terms of historical path. So to complete a couple of history notes, 89, the Soviet Union agrees with Poland to conduct partially free elections. Like Wałęsa, the L has a bar in it, therefore it's pronounced as W. The V is pronounced as, the W is pronounced as V. The L with the bar is pronounced as V. The E with a squiggle underneath it is pronounced as EN. So when you add all that up, what looks like Wałęsa is actually pronounced Wałęsa. He's first popularly elected president of Poland, ever. And then Parliament was elected totally free. There were no restrictions in 91. The Warsaw Pact, the opposite of NATO, was dissolved. And then the Soviet Union itself fell apart. 99, Poland joined NATO. In 2004, they joined the European Union. And our tour director would often refer to, oh, this road was built with European funds. The Solidarity Center that we showed you, that looks like a boat, built with primarily European funds. So Europe has helped Poland considerably. To my surprise, the tallest building in Europe, if you ignore Russia, is in Warsaw. I didn't have a clue. Now, this is a commercial slide. It's 1,000 feet high, 53 floors up. It was built in just 3 years ago. It's as far up. How far down did we say the salt mine was?
Over about
1,000. So this, if you flip this upside down, that's how deep the salt mine goes. We didn't go quite that far down.
Does that 1,000 feet include
There's
the,
9 levels in the salt.
the
salt mine.
antenna or the spire?
I don't know. That's a good question. I simply don't know.
Usually it does.
Usually it does, but I
So
don't
they
know.
get credit for the extra height.
Yeah. There, Warsaw, of course, 85% destroyed by the Nazis. It is a gleaming modern city with pockets like the Jewish cemetery, which I failed to mention before. The Jewish cemetery in Warsaw is the largest in Europe, which outside Israel probably is it's the largest outside Israel. This is a river. That's a pedestrian bridge across the river, which the group walked. It was one of those sunny days we had. It was gorgeous, and the city was gleaming and pretty. And again, parts of it are reconstructed. In Gdansk, which is on the coast, they have preserved a lot of the buildings, or rather reconstructed them, because the Soviets destroyed 85%. This is a pedestrian bridge that's, in this picture, closed to boats and open to pedestrians. It rotates so that it can be open to boats and closed to people. That's kind of cool. You want to add anything to that?
The other thing I found quite interesting about this, if you look at some of those things, those buildings as they go up, those various floors are owned by one family. I was thinking you'd have one level and then another level and another. That's not necessarily the case. Now, some of them are more modernized, but even in the earlier times before they got destroyed, they'd go up 3 or 4 stories for one family. So they're kind of narrow this way and go up and down, which I found very interesting. And the crossing for the boats I found quite interesting, because that moved back and forth to let people move across. But all this was rebuilt, and the fun part of the rebuilding portion, now, if there's a part of the wall remaining, they left it and built up to it. So in some of the older walls in various cities here, some of the older walls you could go and see the bullet holes where bullets were fired, where they actually had the fighting going on within the city. If you want a little bit of history of World War II, and you need to go over to Poland. That's all I'm going to tell you there.
I've been in city squares all over Europe. city squares in Botswana and in Krakow are as pretty as any I've seen. That includes Munich, Berlin, Barcelona, Rome, Athens. I was not expecting that. They were gorgeous. We got a chance to see both of those cities, both in the daytime and at night. And lively place. I echo what Mick said. Both of us have some degree radar when to be worried about where you are, especially at night, especially in cities. That alarm did not go off at any time during this trip. You just felt safe. It was stunning, the absence of fear. Just gorgeous. Of course, it's covered areas. Only gets rain for drinking and eating here. There's protests every so often in some of the city squares. They have a vibrant democracy, and I'm proud of it. Mick, you want to talk about the horses?
These are little buggies that you can rent so you don't have to walk around the city. They'll take you around. This is went for $100. Now, what was interesting about this, there were several of them lined up like taxis in the square. Most of them had very attractive female drivers, which I found interesting, but I wanted to figure out how much it was. So as I went up to find out what it cost and was asking her, some guy came out. I felt like I was in a major city here in the U.S. and I had a pen showing up to make sure I was being okay. It made me very uncomfortable. But it was very interesting. They take these, you get in that buggy and you go around. We did one for $50 in Warsaw that we did for $50 that we rode around. And the guy wouldn't let you pet his horse, but after we took the ride, he gave us carrots to feed it. So it was kind of fun to see the horses. And all the horses and buggies are really decorated really well here. It's really a lot of fun to see them and work with them. And I have several pictures of them. That's one of my favorites. Well, Steve talked about the dragon.
You're the one on the dragon.
Okay, the dragon is kind of cool because it's one that the modern fairy tale version takes place during the reign of King Krakos. Legendary singer found land stuffed with sulfur caused dragon to drink until burst. This is really kind of fun for us because it was raining. This is a rainy day. And if they tell you to bring a raincoat, bring a raincoat. When they get to raining, it's just a steady drizzle for the most part. We didn't have a real heavy rain. But you're walking for a lot of the tour, and we had a guy taking us around. I think it's every 15 minutes or so, this goes off with the dragon coming out. The little kids that were in the area were just really impressed with this, really enjoyed looking at that. It was really fun to listen to them and see them enjoying the overall experience. Carol, I'll let you take this one.
So we had a guide that talked about the Soviet period in Krakow. And he took us to a humongous planned apartment building complex, Noble Hotel. In the Soviet period, what you see there, 2 crossbars, was the playground in one particular apartment complex. And he took us there first, and so that's the tour guys and drizzle, rain, umbrellas. So that was the playground. After the Soviets left, the Poles improved the place and built a real playground. They didn't tear down the buildings, they improved them. Our advanced local specialists would refer to Soviet-era housing as communist commie condos. She loved that phrase. I don't know how many times we heard it. And she lives in one. They've been changed, they've been updated since the Soviets departed. But this was a very gray area of Krakow. Having been to the Soviet Union, Soviets like gray. Really like gray. One night in Krakow, left the hotel to go find snacks at a convenience store and walked past this. Many of you have heard the story Schindler's List. Okay, the protagonist is Oscar Schindler. This building is the factory featured in the story. The Poles have kept it, as they keep everything they can. And then a full museum and office building supporting the museum and historical archives is built above it and down here on the side. To me, this symbolizes Poland. They have kept their history and built above and beyond it. And this was on the way to the convenience store. I was alone at night. I didn't have a fear that something was going to happen to me, other than maybe I'd drop some of the snacks. Yeah, it's a beautiful building, all lit up at night. One of the places we got to go to was this pastry place. And just thinking about it will probably cause me to gain weight. Kathy and I really enjoyed this place. We got there early because we didn't want to do one of the walking tours, and so we bypassed some of the walking and went straight there. It took us a while to find it. It was just a corner or a little pastry shop, and it was marvelous. And the people were so incredibly friendly. It was just wonderful. And I wish I could give you samples, but they'd be stale. And Mick has mentioned glass ornaments. That's one of the things the Poles push. If you want to buy a glass Polish ornament, go to this website, right there. They've got a store downtown Warsaw. If you want to show them your, so Mick's, well, we all bought ornaments.
You can come look at these this afterwards. But I bought several of these Christmas ornaments, basically, made for Christmas. Found that they were very well received. Here's one. They're all handmade, hand blown. In my mind, they're just absolutely gorgeous. In my mind, these are just absolutely gorgeous. So you're welcome to come up and look at this when we get done here. You're definitely welcome to come look at it. And then the lesson learned, took me forever to get them ordered. Use Microsoft Edge as your browser if you go out here. If you get on Edge, you go up to the upper right-hand corner, you can click on, say, convert to English, and it's stable. Every other one, I get part of an order put in and go to Polish, and I didn't know where to go from there. So, I tell you, but you're sure welcome to come look at this one.
So during and after the tour, the four of us, Lisa's a friend, we used to live in Idaho Falls, now lives in North Carolina. What were our aha moments? Well, Lisa said, well, Poland wasn't free until 1989. And Americans, we think the war ended in 45. Kathy, I didn't realize how under siege they were and how resilient they are. If you can add to what you put up here, the U.S. and UK traded Eastern Europe to the Soviets in exchange for saving some of our soldiers. I mean, Roosevelt and Churchill gave away Eastern Europe at the Yalta Conference. And what they got for that was the Soviet army serving as the meat grinder against the Nazis, meaning that we lost fewer troops than they did. I had not really looked at World War II that way. Well, I'm long-winded, therefore I have more words up there. Years ago, I visited Greece and eventually realized in putting together a Friends for Learning talk, when you put together a talk, you reflect, you learn, you process things. Well, in doing so, I realized I had a timeline, and for about 1,500 years, there are no famous Greeks. And I pondered this. I said, well, wait a minute, Socrates, Archimedes, all of these people who gave us so much of Western civilization, the Greeks, did they suddenly go stupid? all the names in your head about the Renaissance, are any of them Greek? No. Greece wasn't free until early 1800s. But when putting together this talk and realizing Curie, Chopin, and other geniuses occurred in the time period that Poland culturally was there, but Poland as a country was not. So it's a contrast to the Greeks. The resilient Poles produced genius even when Poland did not exist. They kept their culture, they kept their language, they kept their religion. I am just utterly impressed. After the tour, I kept in contact with our tour director a bit. He's battling cancer, and I haven't heard from him for a while, so I'm quite fearful. I asked him, how in the hell are Poles so resilient? And this is what he sent me back. Poland, the capital letters are in his email.
Could you pause for a minute till someone gets their phone?
Yeah, can someone
It's like it's.
destroy their
What is
phones?
it?
He's an orphan.
Well, there was an abandoned wallet here,
No, it went away.
but it went away.
Everybody take your phone out, see if it's doing something.
So he wrote back this quote from Reagan. Poland may be temporarily subdued, but the Polish people will never be defeated. Didn't really answer my question, but I thought it was a nice quote. There is a stubbornness, there is a resilience in the Polish culture that is amazing. All kinds of other cultures and languages have disappeared throughout history. I dare say I can't think of a place more invaded than Poland, and they have triumphed. Trafalgar is I guess it's a British-based company that did this tour. Kathy and I have now done 6 tours with them, so that tells you that we liked them. They treat us well. This was an 11-day tour, plus we got there 2 days early. Just an excellent tour director. We had local experts, some of which we mentioned. And you will get more shots of vodka than you can possibly deal with. There was one place in Krakow, they took us to a bar, and what do they call it? Rocket fuel? You want to describe rocket fuel?
It was tasty.
Yeah, Kathy didn't particularly like it. It was.
They told you got one shot. Well, that's to get you to your table, but they kept coming around. You had to hide your glass, because then you just kept filling it. I'll tell you this,
The other story, we got talking about their drinking in 7 in Poland. Tour director said at his wedding, they had 98 people invited to his wedding. And 12 of those were underage. They had 200 bottles of vodka over a 3-day period. So you want to be really careful if you go there. When they tell you one, they're really not talking a shot glass. It might be a bottle. I'm not sure what they had in mind. But they definitely are very liberal with their vodka.
I have learned from experience, do not try to out-beer Germans, or out-sake Japanese, or out-wine most of Europe, and never try to out-vodka either Poles or Russians. Don't go there. So highest recommendation for this company. And that's all of our slides.
Any questions or comments so far? Go ahead, Paul, sir.
What currency do they use there?
Currency is Zloty, Z-L-O-T-Y. We use a factor of 4. If it said it was $100 Zloty, we said it was roughly 25, and that got us into an idea of where we could, the conversion was 3.8 or something like that. We just used a factor of 4. It's called a zloty.
And then, did you use cash or credit cards? I gather.
I used a credit card because I have a credit card that has no fees for doing the conversion. So I could either charge it as American and they make the conversion on the spot, or I could charge it as zlotys and they convert it and it'd come back to me correct. We had cash with us, and all of us bought some of the zlotys as we went in. But for the most part, I personally just stayed on a credit card as much as I could.
Even like for that horse-drawn wagon, I mean.
That we paid cash.
That would be cash.
Yeah.
And tips to our local guides in Gdansk and so forth. So, you know, on the street, if you will, it was generally more convenient to do cash. But the Poles are very good at being able to take American money.
We found a Greek for you, El Greco,
El Greco.
Renaissance painter.
Got it, thank you. I stand corrected. Nick, these are your slides.
We're going to go just through some of the slides we did. This is the Gdansk again. Gotta find the point.
These are bonus slides that we didn't know we'd have time for.
So this is, change that to slideshow. Please. It says same boat. All of these things were rebuilt. So there we go. That's that same bridge that we looked at a little bit earlier. This is one of the town squares, looking around through the town squares. The town squares there were very fascinating to me and they were huge. And they had demonstrations going on and whatever, similar to what we see with students today here in the US and whatever. But there's a place that they all go and get together and have a place to go do things. There's shop, there's food. You get in there and there's Mickey D's sign over here, Burger King over there, you know, whatever. They definitely are Americanized as far as it comes to some of the fast food. This is a wall that's partially rebuilt and filled in where there were holes and whatever. I took that deliberately because it shows the difference between the new brick and the old brick. And you notice how they just go in and work the brick in and around whatever's there. They preserved what was left and tried to build to it, which I found extremely fascinating. This is a pirate ship. This is where we learned about the one-shot vodka stuff. This is the pirate ship that they put us on to take us back around through the harbor to get us back to where we can meet up with our bus. And then, of course, they came up and they poured you a shot of vodka. And if you didn't watch it, your glass kept getting filled up and filled up. So very generous with their vodka. But this was kind of fun, just from the old time kind of thing. It's definitely powered by diesel. It's got a diesel engine, whatever. But it's just kind of a fun way to end the day and get back to having to walk. We did quite a bit of walking. Probably the smallest I walked was 3.5 to 4 miles in a day. And the most I did was about 7.5. So but I could have got out of some of that if I was tired by not doing the excursion. I could have just stayed and walked through the town.
That's because you drank the vodka.
I don't remember. This is another part of the architecture. I find the architecture in these different countries very interesting. So this is just me taking a picture of what's going on. I'm sure it has some significance at the time I took the picture, but it's totally escaped me at this point. This is in Gdansk again, and this is a statue of, I never remember some guy, he's a fisherman god kind of thing.
Fisherman.
Yeah. So, and this is taking the Malbrook Castle. This is looking at part of that. This is some of the oldest brick that's in existence today is in this castle. And again, you can see the difference in shades, because even this castle got bombed. We had, that's Malbrook Castle, again. Okay, this is downtown Turin. They use these, I had trouble with my focus on my camera for a period of time, even I wasn't paying attention to what was going on. And this little gnome here, they put these little gnomes outside their doorstops. They put them outside the shop and they'll have a little thing telling you what the gnome is all about. They'll have donkeys, they'll have all sorts of stuff. Also in a lot of the town squares we saw a lot of metal or brass donkeys or figures or whatever that were built out of more metal than anything else. Just looking at the church at night. Same thing. Oh, this is a castle. This is interesting. This only had 250 rooms. So when the king that came into being at the time, when he became king, he decided it was too small and added another 250 rooms. And you have to sit and wonder, because they're decorated really well, the kind of resources you had to have to just off the cuff say, well, let's do another 250. So that gives you a little idea of the separation between the royalty and the common people, because there's common people that are not living very well, and he's adding rooms to this. They're very, very pretty. There's got a lot of antiques in them. They're very well preserved, and they keep track of it. Most of the places you go give you some kind of an earpiece, or your guide can talk to you and tell everybody can hear the same thing. It also makes you stay up with the group, because if it starts fading, you pick up and go find it. It's another view looking at that. The grounds on this, I was tired at this point. This is near the end of the trip. The grounds here were absolutely gorgeous. And off this side, this side over here on your left, that dropped off quite a bit, probably, I'm going to say 80, 90 feet down. And you went down a long path and curled around, came back down, and then it took you to a whole other level of grounds. And not only was I tired, it was raining again, so I didn't do that one. We did have rain for about on 3 different days. This is in that church, that Presbyterian Church of, what's the
Church of Peace.
Church of Peace. I just found that's one of mine that actually turned out there. We had opportunities to see numerous churches, Catholic churches, all through the place, and we went through several of them. And they were all very, very nicely done.
Were those characters there from salt crystals? Or?
No, this is going to be more glass kind of stuff. This is, I don't even remember which city it was.
Some of it is glass and some of a lot. This was the wooden church. So a lot of what looks like plaster is actually wood. Painted.
Blood, straw, wood, and 11 months. Pull that off in America. This is just our favorite little statue of the dragon. I found that quite fascinating. This is just looking into one of the places in the wood. I think that's part of that wood castle.
Yep.
I can't remember the name of that one. This is just some of what I kind of liked out of my photos. You can see the history. You know, when we think if we see something that's a couple hundred years old, we're pretty excited about it. These people go back to the 1600s and 1400s with some of what they have. You can see how they put it back together. This is one in the salt mine. And see, the lighting is such that you get what you get. But you can see the salt crystals in this one. I'm going to try and do this. These veins and stuff, the salt crystals, and you can see when you're there, you can actually make out and tell it's salt. The salt has a little bit of a brown tint to it. You can go buy some of it in the gift shop if you choose to. That's again the salt mine. They got some absolutely beautiful. When you think these are people that are religious and want to give their time and their craftsmanship to donate that for future generations, I was pretty impressed with that. That's another picture of us going down into the mine. There were places that you could visually see, but you didn't have enough light for the camera yet, where you go down and wind around this way and then come back down lower and then come back the other way. So it winds down, and there's plenty. Yes, ma'am.
Are the salt mines here still actively mined?
No, they're not actively mining it per se. It's pretty much tourism. They make a pretty good chunk of change from operating this thing.
It's a UNESCO historical site.
Okay.
In fact, we saw lots of UNESCO sites on this tour.
Yeah, when you come back up, they put you in the elevator. Once they get you packed in there, I think you can pick your feet up off the floor and stay in the same place. They shove a bunch of it because it's really small.
And you look at the fact that they used to take the donkeys and horses and stuff that they used in the mine, used to go down in there, and then they'd take care of them while they were down there. There's quite a history to this that makes it worth going. If you ever get a chance to see this, I would highly recommend it. It's one of the most fun things I've done in my lifetime. There's another chandelier. And the wood that they used in here was pretty phenomenal too. So they build these shrine kind of things, and then have the figures of salt in there. Another that's a different chandelier. Look at the difference in the way it comes out. When you think of those being salt crystals, that's pretty impressive. Excuse me, that's my phone. It's reminding me to take my meds. I thought I had to take off. Apparently that takes precedence. This is a good dance. You get into the fact that you got the bright light. Messing with your camera and get your camera settings is pretty difficult. The truth of the matter is, Steve and I were the only two people that I really saw that had single lens reflex SLR camera. Everybody else was using cell phones for the most part. And the problem with it is you'd be set up for a great picture, somebody would walk in front of you, I swear. We had one lady on the tour that was just, everybody was irritated with her. She'd walk out in front of us. So. This is entering Auschwitz. This is coming in. You look and you go, is this where am I where I think I am? Because these buildings are really quite nice. There's the main square. There's looking at some of the barracks.
Yeah, that is.
There's the steps. Again, these steps just hit me. There was something about them. I noticed I was a little unsteady on those steps. And then I turned around and looked and I thought, oh my God, how many people's feet went over to where those treads down that way? And that's in the European Solidarity Center. We talked about that. It's a replica of a ship. That's what they built. That's what and I think that's a major way of making money today, that tourism. Now this is impressive because in the ceiling inside, these are the workers' hard hats. These are the people that worked in the shipyard. And they put the hard hats up there in their memory. And it has a lot more of an effect on you when you're standing underneath there than it does in this photo. Here's another set of horses. This is roll call. Here's my lady friend. Oh, this is on the bus, headed up on the bus. This was fun. This is out of Warsaw, we're headed up. I had some nice photos of just the way the bus felt going through some of this. And like I said, they can put those things down little narrow roads like you wouldn't believe. Like I wouldn't try, to be honest with you. And this is a farmer's house, a local farm that we went to. We had lunch there with these guys. One of the things he did, he had an apple orchard. He was converting that apple to vodka. So these are his production stills that are on the farm. And his big thing is he was starting to get where he was being exported out of Poland. He was really pleased he was going to the point. We had a really good, typical Polish meal there that they furnished for us. And it was just interesting to be there. And that's the end of this one.
So how did you like the Polish food?
Liked it a lot, to be honest with you. I think most of us really did. There was nothing that really didn't like. We had soup one time. It was a typical Polish meal. So we get this soup, and it's kind of watery, and I'm thinking, well, this is the precursor to the main meal. That was the meal. Oh, I didn't eat all my soup. It was fun. We did a lot of pierogi. We had a lot of choices and whatever, and we really enjoyed it. The food was really excellent. I think Steve can run that also.
Yeah, I enjoyed the food. As you might guess from the geography, kind of a merge or a mix between German and Russian. So this is not fancy Italian or French food. It was hearty food. There was far more fish than I expected. Of course, the Baltic is one of the countries of Poland. There's a lot of rivers, and those rivers have fish that are utilized. Not everyone on the tour enjoyed the food. It's a bit different than going here. You don't go to Poland necessarily for food. But the meals were fun. People were just friendly everywhere. It was just wonderful. Questions or comments? Yes, Sam?
Did you find out how to pronounce Poland in Polish?
No.
If we did, we don't remember.
We did not learn, at least I did not learn how to say please or thank you. I know we were told it a million times. Maybe you remember.
It's a difficult language to learn. You're not gonna learn it. More characters, more characters, and then accent marks. And we have 26, they have 32. Then they have 7 accent marks that go with it.
And we did not know how much time we would take. I did prepare this slide. The left column is English. The middle column is Polish, written in our alphabet. And the final column is an attempt at what the pronunciation would be. Poland's not up there. So Krakow, in English, we ignore the accent, but the accent's important. So Krakow in the middle, the W is pronounced as a V, so the pronunciation is actually Krakow. The tour guide sometimes would confuse me because he'd shift back and forth just as I have in this talk. So I had to learn, for example, that Warszawa is what we call Warsaw. Because sometimes he'd say it one way and sometimes he'd say it the other. But by context, you could figure out what was going on. And then the third city, which is his hometown. I still struggle with that. So the L with the cross is actually pronounced as a V, but you gotta really look to see that little cross there, that little bar. Otherwise, you miss it. Karol Wojtyła, I mentioned, again, his name's got the L with the bar, and Lech Walesa. So, yeah. It's not as bad as trying to understand Japanese, but it's definitely a challenge. It's a pretty language to hear. It does it great, at least I know. But it's challenging. Questions or comments?